What's up, people? Back with another reaction, back with some more punk rock, and we're back with some more Propagandhi. And in fact, this one is a request. Ryan, a guy who's been watching some of the videos and putting in some really great comments below some of the videos, he's a Propagandhi fan, and he mentioned that he wouldn't mind seeing, excuse me, a reaction to Comply Resist. So that's what we're going to do. This is from 2017, from their most recent studio album, Victory Lap. I did want to start this video with an apology to Sue Lin, the most recent member of Propagandhi. There's a couple videos, I think State Lottery, which I don't think I've uploaded on this channel yet, but I know Back to the Motor League. I mispronounced her name. Like I remember learning it was Sue Lin a few years back when she joined the group, and then for some reason I said it like Suleiman in like 2 different videos. So big apologies to her. Not sure why I did that. Nevertheless, shout out to the band as seen here. We're going to listen to, as I said, a song called Comply Resist, which, as far as I can tell, is sort of a criticism of the late Christopher Hitchens, who, look, you know, there's some interesting things he wrote, like the missionary position, if you've ever read that book, but ultimately, you know, I'm a secular guy, but not every secular person who has written or spoken about their secularism in public settings am I a huge fan of. And ultimately, I think Christopher Hitchens was in some ways a bit of a prick. He was very supportive of the invasion of Iraq based on faulty intelligence. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I think he did have a very condescending attitude toward what I guess could be called like indigenous peoples and non-Western cultures, or more specifically, indigenous peoples in non-Western places. So, yeah, this is a critique of something he wrote about indigenous Americans. I think it was like the early 90s he wrote this, and it was basically saying that, like, you know, they didn't appreciate the white man's burden, essentially. They didn't appreciate that, like, what had been done for them, and, you know, oh, look at all this infrastructure and all this, you know, civilization that was brought to you. And, of course, you know, anyone who knows in an academic sense about the history of indigenous peoples and, you know, their interaction with Europeans and eventually, you know, Euro-Americans, would know that that is a grossly oversimplified and highly romanticized vision of the way in which indigenous Americans came to live with Europeans and so on the North American continent. So, I don't know if some of this is in relation to like Canadian First Nations or so on, because again, I haven't read the particular piece in question, or at least I don't think I've read it in a long time. And as I said, I'm not like a huge fan of the late Hitchens anyway, so you know, I never really like sought out his work too much. Nevertheless, I do believe that's what this song is about. It's sort of Propagandhi's riposte to the idea that, like, oh, well, they should have been grateful for, you know, what they were given, and, you know, if there were some eggs broken in the, if there were some shells broken in the process, well, you know, that's just the way it goes. And I think this is Propagandhi's retort. So again, lyrics are interpretational, even when they do kind of seemingly have a more specific origin or source. So let me know if you have a different take on this, or let me know if you have read the piece by Hitchens and, you know, you could speak to it a little more in a little more detail. But that's my understanding. And then obviously I think one can apply sort of the dialogue of this song to interaction with indigenous peoples in many places, not just North America and not just this particular context. So with all that set up, here we go. This is Propagandhi, Comply Resist from Victory Lap, 2017 on Epitaph Records, but I believe in conjunction with G7 Welcoming Committee. Here we go.
Circa 1992, Hitchens faxed his copy through as regards Columbus Day.
Indigenous Peoples Day. No.
If you'll permit me the conceit of a posthumous critique, I'll paraphrase. My colorful, exotic friend, respectable, well-spoken, unlike the rest of them.
The noble savage stereotype.
You know I'm colorblind, and you're a credit to your kind. Your kind. The silly talk of resurgence, ceremony communion with an unconquered natural world. Tell me, where is your gratitude for what we've done? legacy back we bestowed. Upon his savage emptiness, when our cause mistakes were made.
They played this when I saw them and fucking went off.
Progress goes up to a steady idle blade.
Ugh.
Elevation, opportunity, friendship born, communities, the trees that we broke, the lands that we
And that's, you know,
settlements put to the charge.
I'm not going to bring in my own historical research too much, but look, I studied the Muskogee or Creek peoples in the 4 to 5 decades following the end of the American War of Independence, up until the end of the Creek War, which is sort of the local theater of the War of 1812. It came to an end like 1814, 1815. So look, I have a very specific place and peoples that I've studied in my historical academic endeavors, but one of the main features of that period's history of the Muskogee is constantly making agreements with either the state of Georgia and their government, or the fledgling United States government, or local county officials and so on, about land and land use, and then constantly the people of Georgia, or even the government who signed the agreement, or like representatives of the Bureau of Indian Affairs for the federal government, constant breaking of agreements. It's just like, okay, look, if you give us this land, we're going to get rid of any trade debts you might have, and ultimately we're going to sign a thing that, like, we're not going to ask you for more land, and, like, this will be the end of it. And then 10 years later, a new, like, administration in the state government is like, look, we know that there's some agreement, but at the end of the day, you have some debts with this trading house again, and at the end of the day, we're going to have to take this land, and there's nothing you can really do about it, and so on. So I'm very keen, or not keen, but I'm very sensitive to discussions of the way in which governments, local, provincial, or national, repeatedly these agreements were broken by the very governments that had just signed them with these groups of indigenous peoples, or they'd sign one agreement about land use with one tribal entity, and then they'd sign another one with another tribal entity saying that, like, oh, this land that we just that we just gave to them in a different agreement that we're not telling you about, yeah, that's your land, that's definitely your land, but we are going to take this other land, and then, oh, now you and this other tribe have a disagreement, well, we'll step in, we'll play the impartial negotiator and sort it all out and maybe take some more land in the process. So again, when I hear lines about the way in which governments at different levels constantly broke their own agreements that they had just signed, or that their predecessors, the previous administration, had signed with these tribal groups, it just hits home like so painfully, because anyone who's studied the history of different indigenous peoples in North America will know that is one of the hallmarks of the first couple hundred years of the United States, and their involvement with tribal groups that had predated that political entity. So yeah, when I hear that line, it really does hit home. Not hit home, but hit me as a historian who has studied these things.
The trees that we broke, the lands that we filched, settlements put to the charge. The children we abuse are from young.
Yeah, we're just going to assimilate you into society. Oh, we're not going to let you speak your own language, and we're going to punish you for having any cultural artifacts that are representative of your own culture and religion. Propagandhi's like musical composition and performance skills are crazy. Like, part of it is like, it's just such a different style from where they started. Like, the silly ways you do your hair. Again, that's like those cultural assimilation schools. It was basically like, yeah, the way you assimilate is getting rid of everything that has meant anything to you and your people. Love that harmony.
Don't you worship us all? Racist comply. You got it.
crazy. It's interesting. I don't know this album nearly as well as like pretty much every other album of theirs because I just haven't spent as much time listening to it. Obviously, I've heard the whole thing, and I made a point to like listen to it a couple times, like in the days before that I saw them at House of Blues in Anaheim. But the reality is I didn't remember all the sort of musical twists and turns of this one. I did remember a lot of the lyrical content, but I didn't remember sort of the shifts and some of the like transitions from measure to measure there. So that was really enjoyable. As I said, let me know if someone has a slightly different take on this song. I do think it's pretty clear they are addressing the late Hitchens and his sort of crass and ultimately sort of like ethnocentric view of the treatment of indigenous peoples in North America and elsewhere. So I think the general meaning of this one seems pretty straightforward, but again, there are connotations of it that maybe I'm not fully certain of just because I haven't listened to it as many times as say stuff from their first couple albums or whatever. And also I'm not sure if it's specifically in reference to like what is in now the modern United States, or if he's if the original thing that Hitchens wrote was addressing all of North America, so also like Canadian First Nations. I'm not sure. So again, someone let me know if you have any further information in that regard. But yeah, like I said, I really do enjoy this album, even if I don't know it as well as the other ones. We're going to come back for the title track, definitely. I'm a big fan of the title track of this one, which they also played when I saw them, unsurprisingly, and that also went off. I mean, honestly, there's nothing they played that didn't go off. I would say the tune that maybe got the biggest reaction was Back to the Motor League. Like, me and the friend of mine who I went with, we were both pumped to hear that. And the crowd, when they heard that opening, everybody fucking lost it. And as I mentioned, Sue Lin, I'll say her name correctly again, she was the one who did the shout part that I think Todd did up until that point. And it really hit. So yeah, that was great. But let me know if there's another song on this one beside the title track that you'd like to see me react to. Once again, shout out to Ryan. Really appreciate your involvement with the videos. Very happy you found my channel. But yeah, let me know if any of you have any other Propagandhi reactions that you'd like to hear, or any other punk rock reactions. Always keen to take requests. Other than that, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Have a good night. And I will see you next time. Peace.